Chapter 4653. Updated quickly. At that time, she secretly liked Rong Yu and collected everything about him. And Qin Mo didn't know about this until Rong Yu was in the hospital. But He Huan had forgotten about this. But Qin Mo didn't forget. He remembered that day when He Huan came to him. At that time, they had nothing to do with each other. The person she liked was Rong Yu. She told him that she would marry Rong Yu in the future. When she came to him, Rong Yu was lying in the hospital in a vegetative state. Only Qin Chen had the confidence to operate on Rong Yu, and he had to wait for the right opportunity. Regarding Qin Mo's love life, Qin Chen knew, so she didn't dare to operate on Rong Yu. Qin Mo had the final say in everything. That day, He Huan barged into the CEO's office of King Entertainment. Qin Mo was in a meeting and she went to the meeting room. Secretary, he couldn't stop her. Qin Mo was in a meeting and He Huan opened the meeting room door. The only person who dared to do this and didn't die was He Huan. That was what Secretary he thought to herself. She let out a long sigh and looked at Qin Mo, asking silently. And Qin Mo looked at He Huan indifferently. After a long time, he said softly, "The meeting is over. Secretary, he arrange for people to leave." Secretary, he knew something was wrong when he saw President Qin's expression, so he smiled and asked the big shots of the company to leave. When everyone had left, he saw He Huan. He sighed again. This young lady wasn't afraid of the CEO at all. Qin Mo's eyes fell on He Huan's face, but he said to Secretary, "You can leave first." Secretary, he bowed and left, closing the door behind him. The air in the office froze after the door was closed. He Huan leaned against the door and looked at Qin Mo quietly. "What should I do for you to save Rong Yu?" she asked him. Qin Mo sat in his seat and glanced at her. Then, he lit a cigarette and smoked on his own. He didn't seem to care about her at all. Speechless, He Huan bit her lip. Qin Mo. Qin Mo held a cigarette between his slender fingers. He leaned back and puffed out a cloud of smoke as he looked at her. He had the attitude of a superior, yet he also had the air of a ruffian, giving off a very aggressive feeling. That kind of gaze made He Huan uneasy, and she unconsciously took a step back. Qin Mo smiled faintly and said, "I'm not a doctor. How can I save him?" "He Huan, you think too highly of me." He Huan pursed her lips and said softly after a long time, "I know Qin Chen won't operate on Rong Yu without your permission." She had always been a proud princess, especially in front of Qin Mo. But now, she was begging him. Begging him to save Rong Yu. Before He Huan came, she actually knew what kind of price she would have to pay, but she wasn't willing to pay until the moment was right. After she finished speaking, Qin Mo smiled faintly and said, "Qin Chen is the one who can save Rong Yu. You should beg Qin Chen. Isn't that right?" He Huan bit her lip. "But I know she will listen to you. If you don't ask, she won't dare to do the operation." Actually, she always blamed Qin Chen in her heart, but she couldn't really blame her. She knew that she was in love with Rong Yu. She used to be with Qin Mo and hugged him. It was very sweet, but she was too afraid of him, so she got together with Rong Yu. Qin Mo had never said anything, but now she was begging him like this, which was too embarrassing. He Huan pursed her lips and waited for his answer. After a while, Qin Mo finally said, "So, are you begging me?" She looked up and there was a hint of anticipation in her eyes. Qin Mo smiled faintly and said, "Sure. But on the condition that we get married immediately and get our marriage certificate in the afternoon." He raised his hand to look at the time and said in an even calmer tone, "There are about 2 hours before the Civil Affairs Bureau opens in the afternoon. You can think about it. As for lunch, you can have it with me or you can look for Secretary He Huan chose to have lunch with Secretary He without hesitation. Chi Nemo looked at her quietly and then said lightly, "That's fine too." He then walked out. Huan stayed in the meeting room alone for a long time before she bit her lip and walked out. At noon, Chi Nemo sat there alone. Secretary He came over and looked at his untouched lunch. He said softly, "President Chin, there's an important meeting in the afternoon. Why don't you eat something first?" Chi Nemo looked up at Secretary He and asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is she?" Secretary He smiled and said, "She's fine. She's resting after lunch, but she's always in a daze." Chi Nemo was stunned for a moment and then said in a low voice, "She can still eat. Is she so sure that I'll be soft-hearted?" But she was wrong. He wouldn't be soft-hearted. Because he only had one chance. If he missed this chance, he wouldn't get another one. So even if she hated him, Chi Nemo wouldn't let go of this opportunity, even if she called him despicable and shameless. Chi Nemo sat quietly for a long time. Time ticked by. Finally, it was 1:30 in the afternoon. It was also the time he had arranged to meet her. Chi Nemo felt that he had never felt so anxious before. It felt like he had waited for a century and she had finally come. He had waited for her for so long. Chapter 46-54. And finally, she was here. Chi Nemo stared into her eyes and didn't move. Huan walked towards him step by step. Finally, she walked around the desk and stood in front of him. She stood there and looked up at him. "I've thought about it, Chi Nemo. If you want to marry me, let's get married." He sat there and looked at her quietly. After a long time, he said hoarsely, "Am I the only one who wants to marry you?" "Huan, don't you have any?" He felt a little depressed when he said that. After all, they had been together for so long and she had looked at him like that before. Women weren't the only ones who were silly. Chi Nemo had been romantic before and he had thought that they would always like each other. If she didn't like him, she wouldn't have been willing to live with him and wouldn't have allowed him to interfere with her private affairs. If she didn't like him, why would she look at him like that? After so many years, Chi Nemo didn't know what he had done wrong. He had always doted on her and loved her. He thought that girls liked that, but Huan only felt that it was a restraint. She liked someone else. He would be lonely for as long as she was with Romeo. He wasn't in a hurry. Because she would have to return to his side eventually. Romeo wasn't strong enough to give her anything, so Chi Nemo had been waiting. He didn't think that she would really like Romeo. Maybe he was too confident that he would let it happen even though he knew it. He waited year after year. Until now, he couldn't take it anymore. Huan said that she wanted to marry him and he asked her if she didn't have any feelings for him anymore. Huan stared at him for a long time before she gently turned her face away. It was a rejection. Chi Nemo's gaze landed on her face. He didn't get an answer for a long time. Finally, he left his seat and walked to Huan. Reaching out, he pinched her chin and said hoarsely, "Has he kissed you before?" Huan's eyes widened. She was a little scared. Her instincts told her that it was dangerous. She took a step back and instinctively wanted to escape. Chi Nemo, on the other hand, was as strong as ever. He easily restrained her with 2 fingers, not giving her a chance to escape. Huan bit her lips, and her eyes were filled with fear. She didn't know what he wanted, so her instinct was to run. Chi Nemo took another step forward. He was already very, very close to her, the tips of his feet touching hers. Huan was so scared that he wanted to scream. Chi Nemo's fingers slowly moved. He didn't say much and just quietly looked at her as if he was admiring a work of art. A work of art that belonged to him, Chi Nemo. After a long time, Huan said in a trembling voice, Chin Mo, let me go. Who's going to let me go? He smiled faintly, releasing her abruptly. Go. No matter what, I won't force you to do something against your will. Huan was stunned for a moment, then she instinctively asked him, Yu, why should I help you? Chin Mo said sarcastically. To cure him and watch the two of you fly away together. Huan looked hurt. She wanted to give up, but Yu was in the hospital. She even thought of waiting for him as long as he didn't wake up. However, Huan knew that she couldn't be selfish. She couldn't use someone else's life to fulfill her love. Without true love, how could it be love? Her voice was a little choked. Let's get married. She was probably afraid that he would say something unpleasant or hurtful again, so she hugged him gently. Then, she cried. Chin Mo lowered his eyes and looked at Huan quietly. He thought to himself that she had cried like this when they were about to get married. Now, she had forgotten everything. She cried again when she saw Yu and Ai Mengmeng together. When would Huan shed a tear for him? Quietly, he reached out and wiped away her tears. He said, Huan, it's 2019. Everything has to start again. Huan was in a daze. Didn't you say that you were hungry? Chin Mo smiled gently, not wanting to think about the past. He was also human, he could get hurt. And he never showed his wounds to Huan. After a long time, she thought that he didn't feel pain. Chin Mo let out a long sigh. I'll get someone to get you something to eat. Huan hummed in acknowledgement. Her nose and eyes were still red, like a bunny's. Chin Mo led her to the sofa and ordered someone to get her something to eat. He brought a hot towel over and wiped her face with it. Huan was in pain and cried out, Chin Mo, can't you be a little gentler? He looked down and stared at her. After a long time, he said calmly, you cried for someone else and you still want to be gentle. Mrs. Chin won't be gentle this month. He was so shameless. Chapter 46-55. Huan sat on the sofa, wearing a casual outfit. She bit her lip and stared at him. This was the first time she had said Mrs. Chin to her since she woke up. She actually felt that it was quite nice. Or perhaps it was because she had been traumatized by Yu that she instinctively wanted to find a safe haven. She seemed to have successfully pleased Chin Mo, and he was no longer in a bad mood. Hence, he patted her head like a puppy and did not coax her. He sat beside her and opened his laptop to start a video conference. He did not avoid Huan at all. Huan had been sitting there for a while, but the bodyguards came over and gave him a lot of food. She was no longer interested in Chin Mo's affairs. She hugged a bucket of chicken wings and ate. That was Huan's favorite. She had liked it since she was young, and now that she had returned to her 18-year-old self, she probably liked it even more. Chin Mo was multitasking while he was in the conference. At this moment, apart from a faint bitterness, he was not entirely devoid of joy. At least, Huan had given up on Yu. Even if she still liked him, she would not do anything to him since he had a wife. As Chin Mo thought about it, he was a little distracted. On the other side of the conference, Anna from the Public Relations Department asked, President Chin. Chin Mo snapped back to reality and continued the conversation. Just then, Huan's eyes drifted over and she noticed the woman on the screen. She was really beautiful. She looked like she was of mixed blood, but at the same time, she had the qualities of an Asian woman. She exuded an elite aura. She had instantly outshone many celebrities. It was a waste for such a person to be a woman in the workplace. Huan felt a little inferior. She looked at Anna and then down at herself. She felt that she was too skinny. Chin Mo happened to turn his head and saw Huan's actions. He knew her well and immediately understood why she was behaving this way. He smiled and then chuckled. "What are you doing?" Huan was also startled. After a long while, he finally said, "No, nothing's wrong." She sat back and continued to eat from the bucket. Mo continued the meeting, and Huan found that he mainly talked about Anna, the public relations manager who was so good-looking that Huan was jealous of. She bit harder on the chicken wing and chewed. Mo, on the other hand, didn't have anything to say. However, when they finished talking about business and were about to go offline, Anna suddenly said in French, "President Qin, pay more attention to the children's emotions." Mo naturally saw Huan at the side. Huan also glared at him, then at Anna. What a hateful woman. Huan was about to explode. She understood French. She wasn't like the little kid that Anna had described, let alone a kid with emotions. With that, Anna went offline. There was silence in the VIP ward again. But this time, Huan was not so silent, because Huan had been eating like a little mouse. Mo stretched out his hand. She was shocked and quickly tried to move away. But he directly took a chicken wing from inside. "I'm hungry too." When Mo ate it, he was actually very elegant and good-looking. Huan looked at him eagerly. Mo smiled. "Why are you looking at me?" Huan lowered her eyes and chewed on the chicken wing angrily. After a while, she looked up again. Mo, all the female employees in your company are so good-looking. Chapter 46-56. Memorized. Mo smiled faintly. As the manager of the PR department, of course, she won't look bad. But whether she looks good or not doesn't have much to do with me. She just has to work hard. By the way, Huan, you're not jealous, are you? Xiaowan exploded in anger. Of course not. Why would I be jealous? You're nobody to me. For a moment, she forgot that he was her husband again. Mo watched her quietly and suddenly pulled her closer. How is it not related? You're my wife now and you have the right to be jealous of any woman. Even if you want me to fire her now, I won't have any objections. Huan was furious. He was obviously teasing her. So she said angrily, "Fire her then." Mo smiled again. "By making this request, first, you're admitting that you're my wife, right?" In order to get back at him, Huan agreed shamelessly and nodded. The smile in Mo's eyes deepened. "Second, you admit that you're jealous, right?" "I didn't," Huan said in a weird voice. But she was still angry with him, so she quickly softened her tone. "Fine, even if you're right, fire her." Mo's eyes were tinged with amusement. "I agree, but the shareholders won't agree either. Anna is King Entertainment's top PR player." Huan was even more furious. After all, he was just fooling around with her. Was it fun? She ignored him and sat there sulking, gnawing on a chicken wing. Mo only thought she was cute. After a long time, he tugged at her hair. Angry again. At this moment, he was trying to coax her. "But I have another way. I'll arrange for you to be Anna's superior. You can do whatever you want." Even though Huan's memories of when she was 18, she wasn't stupid. How could a naive and sweet girl like her handle a female elite in the workplace like Anna? Yes, naive and naive. This was Huan's precise definition of himself. She stopped talking to him and ate and sulked. Mo just looked at her angry face. He continued to work, but the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, looking very happy. Huan bit her lip and sulked. But then, Mo reached out and pulled her into his arms again. "No. She resisted, but Chin Mo was too overbearing. He placed her in his arms and worked just like that. He Huan bit her lip and said softly after a long time, "You're not right." He smiled. "What's wrong with me? It's not right to talk business with a beautiful subordinate, and it's also not right to hug my wife." "He Huan, what do you want me to do?" He Huan was squeezed so hard that she couldn't say a word. After a long time, she wanted to move away, but her hair was pressed against his chin. He touched her like puppy Mo and said with a smile, "We're cultivating our relationship." He Huan didn't want to do it at all. For a long time, he just kept yelling. Chin Mo enjoyed her yelling. At this moment, it didn't matter whether she loved him or not. Anyway, Rongyu had a wife. Suddenly, Chin Mo felt that Ai Meng Meng was really a very important person. However, when he thought of Ai Meng Meng, Chin Mo's eyes darkened a little. He found out that Ai Jia was Ai Meng Meng's biological sister. Ai Jia also came from the same village, but was adopted when she was young. Chapter 46-57. He sent an email to Rongyu and Rongyu replied that he understood. Chin Mo stared at those 3 words for a long time. He clenched his fists as his thoughts drifted away. He had tacitly agreed to let Rongyu deal with Ai Jia. Because he was thinking too far away, his expression was not very good. It was so gloomy that He Huan could not eat anymore. She stared at him. Actually, she had been sneaking glances at him for the past 2 days. She was not familiar with the 40-year-old Chin Mo. He was very masculine. He was not like this in the past. Even though he was good-looking, she would not blush and her heart would race uncontrollably when he got close to her. She was afraid of him in the past. Now, she was even more afraid of him. Afraid of him getting close to her because they were husband and wife, right? He Huan bit her lip and stared blankly for a long time. On the other hand, Chin Mo felt much better when he looked up and saw her. "You're drooling." He Huan immediately reached out and touched it. Then, she realized that she had been tricked. She glared at him. "Chin Mo, you're too despicable." He laughed heartily. After a while, he lowered his head and looked at her. "Aren't you? You're in a daze." Actually, he knew that He Huan was very impressed with his looks. Moreover, when they were in a good relationship, she admitted that liking Rongyu was just a substitute. The only person she had ever loved was actually him, Chin Mo. However, men were emotional creatures. Chin Mo was even more so. Maybe it was because he loved her too much, or maybe it was because he had begged her too many times. Hence, he was always worried about personal gains and losses. This was not his character, he could not tolerate it. However, this person was He Huan, so he was willing. At this moment, He Huan's face blushed as he stared at her. After a while, she bit her lip and said, "I'm not." Chin Mo smiled and closed his laptop. Then, he said in a low voice, "How about watching a movie?" He Huan gasped. She could not believe that he would bring her to watch a movie. "Aren't I hospitalized? I'll be discharged tomorrow." He smiled. "Also, the doctor can't cure your illness anyway. Maybe going out to play will make you feel better." When he said that, she actually thought of Rongyu and what happened before. Her little head drooped down again, looking a little dejected. Chin Mo pulled her hair. "He Xiaohuan, what do you think?" He Huan replied weakly, "Don't call me He Xiaohuan." Chin Mo smiled again. "Because you are very young now." "I'm 33, she whispered, unsure of herself as she said it. Chin Mo looked at her, his eyes bright. After a while, he said in a low voice, "You're 18 years old now, Mrs. Chin. Go out and take a look at the script written by Rongyu. As he spoke, he reached out his hand and touched her little head again. What happened afterwards was much more wonderful than you can imagine. As he said this, Huan blushed again and looked at him eagerly. Chi Nemo got up and put on a coat for her. He also took one for himself and took her out. Of course, they were followed by a few bodyguards. There was one in the car and 3 in the car behind. Huan and Chi Nemo sat side by side in the back seat of the car. She was a little uneasy. Chi Nemo, why did you bring bodyguards? Chi Nemo was silent for a while before he said in a low voice, to be safe. Chapter 46:58. Chi Nemo was silent for a while before he said calmly, something happened to you previously, so it's best if someone follows you. Huan asked, Chi Nemo, aren't you human? Chi Nemo's face darkened as he glanced at her. I can't follow you all the time. He wanted to keep her by his side all the time, but Huan had always been an active child. When she was 20, she went abroad to study for a few years. After they got married, she didn't return home for 6 or 7 years. Now that he thought about it, they were still young when they were really together. He felt a little gentler in his heart, and he couldn't help but reach out to stroke her hair. Huan had been curled up in the corner, and she didn't move at all. She was afraid that he might have something else. Chi Nemo didn't have anything else. He retracted his hand after touching her hair. Huan was still curled up in the corner, staring at him quietly. After a long time, she seemed to recall something. She bit her lip and asked softly, Chi Nemo, why and how did I get hurt? Chi Nemo looked at her quietly for a long time before he said softly, I was pushed to the ground by a crazy movie fan. My head got hurt. He didn't hide it from her, and his voice was very soft. There's a small blood clot at the back of your head that's pressing on your nerves, so you can't remember for now. Huan was stunned for a moment before she said softly, then, will I never be able to remember in the future? Chi Nemo reached out and pulled her over, placing her in his arms. Huan wanted to avoid him, but he wouldn't let her. He kept her in his arms and stroked her little head as though he was stroking a puppy. His voice was suddenly hoarse. Actually, it's okay if you can't remember. Huan looked up at him, her eyes watery. Actually, the 40-year-old Chi Nemo was much gentler than the 25-year-old Chi Nemo, but she was even more afraid of him. As for this kind of fear, it was actually different from before. As for what was different, even Huan himself couldn't tell. She stared at him in a daze while he smiled faintly. After a long time, she finally thought of a topic. What about that person? Chi Nemo just looked at her quietly and didn't say anything, but there was some unfathomable look in his eyes. Therefore, Huan knew that after the palpitation, his heart began to beat wildly. After all, this was not something an 18-year-old Huan could understand. She bit her lip and murmured after a long time, shouldn't we hand him over to the law? Chi Nemo smiled faintly. Then, he smiled faintly. Even if he is sentenced to a few years, when he comes out, he will be a mad dog. In Chi Nemo's world, he believed in cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Moreover, that person was originally being used by others, so he couldn't tolerate it. Hearing this, Huan was a little stunned and couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. After a long time, she gently broke away from him and shrank back to the original corner. The car was very spacious, so she was actually very far away from Chi Nemo. Chi Nemo didn't force her and only smiled. Do you think I'm scary? Huan shook her head, but she quickly nodded. She just didn't speak and looked depressed. After a long time, she murmured, I want to recover my memory, but I'm afraid it will be very bad. Her gaze fell on his face, and there was a somewhat complicated look in her eyes. Chi Nemo's heart softened. We're not as bad as you think. In fact, it's beyond your imagination. Chapter 46-59. Chin Mo's heart softened. Our relationship is not as bad as you think. In fact, it's beyond your imagination. Although he did not want to compare himself, he still said, it's better than when you and Ronyu were at their best. After all, we are husband and wife and have a child. I've been through so much more than you and Ronyu. Huan listened to him in a daze. Her expression was rather adorable. Chin Mo looked at her dumbfounded expression and was a little annoyed. You don't believe me. Huan wanted to say something but the driver, old Zhao, laughed. You're making things difficult, Chin Mo. She can't remember now. How would she know if you're lying to her? Chin Mo was a little confused. He was still confused for a long time. He wasn't sure that he had actually been teased by old Zhao. Old Zhao was not a person who usually made jokes. Today, it was the opposite. Chin Mo did not want to lose his temper. His gaze fell on Huan's face again. Huan turned her face away from the window. He was not sure if she was smiling. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he still reached out and pinched her little face. Huan squealed and glanced at him. Chin Mo was much happier. He pinched her little face again. We'll be there soon. Be good and follow me. Huan replied, oh. Then, she realized that something was wrong. She glared at him. Why should I follow you? I'm not a child. The car stopped at the underground parking lot of a plaza. Chin Mo took the coat and put it on for her. He chuckled. Mrs. Chin, aren't you 18 years old now? If you're not a child, what are you? Old Zhao and the bodyguards laughed. Huan, on the other hand, snorted. She was so shameless. Chin Mo got out of the car and pulled her down. All right, let's go watch your movie. Huan replied, oh. She turned to look at the four animals and followed them. Do they have tickets? She asked softly. Chin Mo smiled. I guess so. Huan couldn't help but ask again, as long as we come out, will they follow us? Chin Mo's gaze fell on her little face and he smiled. You don't like it? Huan was smart enough not to respond. Chin Mo smiled, knowing that she was a little smart. She wasn't stupid to begin with. She was a very smart child. Therefore, she would not answer such a question. Chin Mo tugged at her hair and smiled. Huan went upstairs and took the movie ticket, but he was dumbfounded. This was clearly the prelude to booking the entire place. She bit her lip. What's the point of looking at it ourselves? Chin Mo said lightly, it's just a movie. Or do you want to be with a group of people? He paused for a moment, then nodded. That's true. Most of the people watching movies are young. You probably want to meet some handsome guy. Huan said angrily, I didn't. Chin Mo smiled. If you don't, then it's fine for us to watch it alone, right? Huan was rendered speechless. After a long while, she snorted. Let's watch it alone. Who has a problem? Chin Mo smiled and got the bodyguards to clear the place. This was King Entertainment's business, so it wasn't a big deal to book the entire place. It was just to boost their sales. Huan and Chin Mo went straight in, followed by the four bodyguards. Even old Zhao could go in with them. Huan sat down and looked at the 5 men in front of her. She said to Chin Mo speechlessly, if we book the entire place, they won't have to come in. Chapter 46-60. She regretted it as soon as she finished speaking. As expected, Chin Mo immediately looked at her with bright eyes. Do you want to be alone with me? Hee-hwan snorted and then focused on the movie. It was really strange to reserve the theater. She found it hard to get into it. Moreover, she didn't have any expectations. Because Hee-hwan, who was 18 years old, had never thought about being a director. However, after looking at it for 5 minutes, her expression changed. She didn't remember what happened later, but she had an indescribable feeling when she watched the movie. It touched her heart, which was something that even Chin Mo couldn't do. He said that they loved each other, didn't they? But why couldn't he be better than a movie? Hee-hwan thought about it and then looked at him with a little complaint. Feeling her gaze, Chin Mo smiled. How was it? Hee-hwan's gaze fell back to the screen. She stared at it for a long time before she exclaimed, "The editing is amazing, and AI Meng acted the best." Hearing her words, Chin Mo smiled faintly. This was Hee-hwan. A girl with principles. Even if she didn't like AI Meng, she was still a rival in love in Hee-hwan's heart. But she couldn't deny her talent and acting skills, so Hee-hwan wouldn't be stingy with her praise. Although she had a small temper, she was still very broad-minded. That was one of the reasons why Chin Mo liked her. But it wasn't the main reason. He liked how unreasonable she was when she threw a tantrum. He liked how she was spoiled by him. So, he was also a masochist. Every time he thought about giving up, he would think that there was only one Hee-hwan in the world. Maybe there were women who were prettier, gentler, or even cuter than her, but so what? They weren't Hee-hwan. So, their excellence and cuteness meant nothing to Chin Mo. She was the only one he liked, and it had been almost 30 years since then. He was already 40 and probably only had another 30 years left. He didn't want to waste time looking for another woman. Even if it was right in front of him, he might not want it. Hee-hwan did not know that Chin Mo's mind was in turmoil. She just looked at the screen, focused, because this was her future. Actually, it was the past again. After a long time, the movie finally ended. Hee-hwan was still staring blankly at the screen and muttered, "Was this really directed by me?" Chin Mo looked at her quietly. Hee-hwan slapped his face with all his might. "I'm not dreaming, right? I'm so outstanding." Chin Mo couldn't take it anymore. He chuckled and said, "I edited it." Hee-hwan's little mouth opened slightly, and she looked dumbfounded. "You? Is it strange? I work for an entertainment company. I know a little of almost everything, but I'm not very good at it." Hee-hwan was speechless again. How is this not very proficient? This was simply forcing others to have no food to eat. Hee-hwan stared at him. Chin Mo smiled, took her hand and walked out. When they went out, there was a crowd in another hall. The movie had just ended. When Hee-hwan and Chin Mo came out, they bumped into the crowd opposite them. Although Hee-hwan was wearing sunglasses, she was still recognized. A few crazy fans shouted her name, and some even wanted to rush over. After all, their idol had been injured, and they were excited to see her. Chapter 46-61. When the fans rushed over, Chin Mo quietly pulled Hee-hwan behind him. Then, four bodyguards stopped the crazy fans so that Chin Mo and Hee-hwan could leave. In the elevator, Hee-hwan and Chin Mo were standing side by side. She stole a glance at Chin Mo. He didn't look too good. She didn't know what was wrong with him. What was wrong with him? But she still asked worriedly, "Do you think I will disappoint the fans if I just run away like this? Will there be any negative impact?" Chin Mo's face was still a little sullen. Hee-hwan stared at him for a while and then asked tentatively, "Chin Mo, what's wrong with you?" Chin Mo glanced at her and said slowly, "I thought you didn't want to be a big director. Now you've become vain and want fans." Huan smiled and said, "Of course I want fans. I will get a share of the box office, right?" She was not stupid. The money was hers. Chi Nemo looked at her and said, "I forgot to tell you. You are not 18 yet, so you don't have a bank card. I will save the box office for you when you grow up." Huan was anxious. She said hurriedly, "I am not 18, I am 33. I can get a bank card now." Chi Nemo smiled and then looked at her face attentively. He said slowly, "Then you will have to admit that you are Mrs. Chin." Huan bit her lip and said after a long while, "I don't want it." Chi Nemo didn't care. He rubbed her hair and said, "If you don't want it, you can continue to be an 18-year-old girl. I don't mind." She was not in good health before. When they lived together, he took care of her most of the time. Now, he was taking care of her too. There was no difference. Not sleeping in separate rooms was Chin Mo's bottom line. At that moment, Huan didn't think that far. She didn't know that she was facing the 40-year-old Chin Mo. He was not as innocent as he was in his 20s. When the elevator reached the second floor, Huan got into the car and realized that it was Chin Mo who was driving. She asked subconsciously, "Where's Uncle Zhao?" Chin Mo drove a Mulsanne, which he often drove, but Huan didn't quite remember it. She had thought that with his identity, he would always be the chauffeur, but he was driving by himself, and he seemed to be very familiar with it. Huan sat next to him and listened to his words while looking around at the things in the car. She couldn't remember anything, but she had always grown up with Chin Mo. As long as she couldn't sense the danger he emitted, they were very familiar with each other, just like a family. That was why she dared to touch his things. However, the things in the car were all very feminine. It was obvious that a woman often sat beside it. From perfume to toilet paper, there was even a small blanket with a Finny Piggy design on it. Even though she was touched, Huan pretended not to know and asked, "Do women often sit in your car?" Chin Mo tilted his head and looked at her before chuckling softly. "Why do you ask?" Huan bit her lip. "These are all women's things. How could they be yours?" Chin Mo didn't reply at first and continued driving. That moment of silence made Huan feel a little uneasy. Could Chin Mo have really cheated on her? She looked at Chin Mo blankly. Just as she was about to ask something, he said, "It's not what you're thinking." Huan froze for a moment. He could read her mind. Chapter 46-62. Chin Mo continued driving and said faintly, "These are all your things." Huan was stunned again. "Huh? What else can I do?" Chin Mo held the steering wheel with one hand and stopped at the red light in front of him. His other hand gently rubbed his good-looking chin, looking particularly masculine. Huan fiddled with the things again and looked up at him. "Really?" He was still looking at her. 33 years old and still likes these things. "Do you think all women are like this?" Huan replied, "Oh." After a while, she looked at him again. Then, she was shocked by the brightness in his eyes. Even Huan, who was like an idiot now, thought that Chin Mo wanted to do something bad. She did not say anything. She lowered her eyes and fiddled with the things with her slim fingers. Then, she looked up at him again. That little gaze of hers was really a little pitiful. Chin Mo couldn't help but laugh, and he laughed very happily. Huan could not help but shout, "What are you laughing at?" Chin Mo started the car and looked ahead. After a while, he snorted happily. "There are a lot of things that you don't know." Huan's face suddenly became a little hot. She did not dare to say anything and turned her face away from the window. She could not help but complain in her heart. The 40-year-old Qin Mo was too difficult to get along with. Just like that, the two of them did not say anything and the car drove all the way to his apartment. It was also the place where they lived after their marriage. Huan had not lived in the wedding house for more than a few months. It was a mansion of about 300 square meters. When the car stopped, Huan asked, "Is this the hospital?" Why did she not recognize it? Qin Mo unfastened the seatbelt. "Let's go home." He unfastened the seatbelt for her and patted her little head. Huan felt that her little brain had crashed after being patted. After a long time, she muttered softly, "I will be discharged tomorrow." Qin Mo found it funny and said, "Do you think I will give you a chance to see Yu?" "I won't go either." Huan lowered her head. Every strand of her hair was filled with dejection. "I have a wife." "Oh." Qin Mo dragged out his voice. After a while, he chuckled and said, "If you don't have a wife, you won't stand on ceremony, right?" Huan bit her lip. "I didn't say that." Qin Mo smiled again. "Don't forget that you have a husband, 18-year-old girl." Huan was about to explode. She glared at him, her face round and round. Qin Mo chuckled and got out of the car. Actually, he thought that the current situation was not bad. Huan was quite interesting. Suddenly, he thought that perhaps this was heaven's compensation to him, making up for all the time that belonged to him. She would make it up to him for all the time he had lost her. Qin Mo's eyes suddenly felt a little hot. He stood in front of Huan's car door and was ready to pull it open. However, the throbbing in his heart came so suddenly that he was not prepared at all. He could only suppress it and try his best to suppress it. Only when he calmed down did he open the car door. He bent slightly and said gently, "We're home." No matter how stupid Huan was, she still knew this. She sat in the car and felt that her legs were a little weak. She could not even take a step forward. She bit her lower lip and felt that it was too embarrassing. She did not want him to know. Chapter 46-63. She bit her lower lip, feeling embarrassed. She didn't want him to know either. However, the 40-year-old Qin Mo had a skill that allowed him to accurately understand her needs. He was already bent over, so he easily lifted her up. "Princess Carrie." Huan couldn't help but let out a yelp. Afraid that she would fall, she immediately hooked her arms around Qin Mo's neck. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at her. "Put me down," she said softly, almost not daring to look at him. Qin Mo's voice was also very soft and abnormally hoarse. "Didn't I carry you like this when you were young?" Huan said pitifully, "I've grown up." Qin Mo was still looking at her quietly as they walked. When they reached the elevator, he didn't let her down. He only said softly, "Now that you've become small again, I'm old." "Huan, do you think that I'm old?" Huan shook her head. "No, you're not old." Then, he lowered his head and kissed her. His voice was hoarse and husky. "I'd better treat you like a child. You're indeed young and insensible now, so I won't fuss too much. Fortunately, it's quite interesting." Qin Mo laughed. His smile was rather joyful. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her. Huan was a little shocked. Even if she only remembered that she was 18, she couldn't be a child. When she retorted like that, Qin Mo laughed softly. "I'm 40, Huan. Compared to me, you're not a child." Huan was shocked again and decided to ignore him. She couldn't win against him in an argument. The elevator door opened. There was only one apartment on the top floor. He swiped the card to open the door. The moment she entered, Huan was stunned. She was sure that if this was the place they were going to live in after marriage, it wouldn't be decorated like this. How should she put it? This was a place where a young girl lived. Many of the soft clothes were light pink, and some were light yellow. She didn't remember having such a young girl's heart, but now that she saw it, she actually felt that it was not bad. Nemo put her down, but did not let her escape. Instead, he gently held her in his arms. His tall body leaned slightly, and his chin rested on her shoulder. He whispered, "Do you like it?" Juan was a little nervous. Feeling that the atmosphere was a little strange, she turned her head away uncomfortably. There was a hint of a smile in Mo's voice. "It's best not to move." She let out another "aw," and did not dare to move again. Only his eyes dared to look around. Mo's voice was still very low. "If you want to stop at 18, I'll accompany you." Juan let out another "aw" before she muttered, "Then you." Mo smiled. "You're just asking for a yard after being given an inch." Her face flushed for a moment before she bit her lip. "How did you know?" He tilted his head and looked at her attentively. After a while, he chuckled. A 40-year-old man knows women very well. If you were a child, it would be easier to understand. Juan was fuming again. In reality, she couldn't win against him. At that moment, she wanted to go home. Because living with a 40-year-old man was really too scary. However, she did not dare to bring it up, nor did she dare to make a fuss about leaving. If she dared to, she was sure that he would have other requests. Juan did not dare to provoke him. Mo finally let go of her and patted her. "Look around by yourself. I'll go make dinner. Also, this place has been renovated recently. The materials used are all environmentally friendly, so there won't be any pollution." Chapter 46-64. "Oh," Juan replied and looked around. Mo looked at her back for a while before he went to the kitchen. Juan looked around. It was huge and the decorations were very girly. Except for Mo's study, which was maintained in a dignified manner. This was probably Mo's last bit of stubbornness. Juan didn't go in. She only looked at the door for a while. Then, she opened a children's room. It was a suite, and it was all pink. She even saw a pink bathtub in the bathroom. Oh my God, it was quite cute. Juan wanted to go in and soak for a while. Mo came in with a glass of juice and saw Juan looking at the bathtub eagerly. He smiled. "Our room is pink too, and it's bigger and more comfortable. You can soak in it." Juan turned to look at him in disbelief. He was actually willing to use a pink bathtub. Mo was dazzled by her starry eyes, and a smile appeared in his eyes. "I know how to take a shower. It won't be like what you're imagining." Juan nodded and asked again, "You really don't know how to?" "I don't." Mo's face was a little dark. He put the juice in her hand. "Go take a bath and rest for a while." He raised his hand and looked at his watch. "Dinner will be served in about 2 hours. Just eat whatever you like." Juan wasn't ignorant at all. She said softly, "You're so busy. Isn't it a waste to spend 2 hours cooking?" Mo looked down. "Isn't home life like this? Do you want me to go home and still look like an elite?" He paused for a moment. "If you want, I can cooperate." Juan bit her lip and immediately refused. "I don't like it." He smiled and helped her take off her coat. "You don't have to wear it because of the temperature at home. Go take a bath. Don't take too long." He instructed her like an old father. Juan looked at him strangely and went to take a bath by herself. In the master bedroom, it wasn't as girlish as outside. There was always a hint of masculinity. Perhaps it was because Chin-mo needed to sleep too, so he couldn't stand being so feminine. The main color was white and beige, which was very comfortable. Hee-hwan lay down on the big white four-poster bed. Lying on her stomach, she closed her eyes and felt very comfortable. It was so comfortable that she wanted to sleep. She really fell asleep. After some time, Chin-mo came over and found that she had fallen asleep. He couldn't help smiling and sat down next to her. He looked at her sleeping appearance, a 33-year-old woman who had been his wife for so many years. He reached out a hand and gently stroked her hair, chuckling, "You still say you're not a child." His heart was indescribably soft. He lowered his head and kissed her. After thinking for a while, he decided not to wake her up for dinner. Her health was not good, and she was probably exhausted from playing for half a day. Chin-mo accompanied her for a while before going to the study to deal with work. Recently, he could only accompany her at home or in the hospital. She was so young now, and he was really worried about her. He had to bring her along everywhere. Just the thought of it made him feel silly. It was warm in the master bedroom. When Hee-hwan woke up, she had a blanket on her body. She rubbed her eyes and sat up immediately. Looking at the blanket on her body, she was a little confused and understood. Chapter 46-65. Hee-hwan removed the blanket from her body and got out of bed. It was quiet everywhere in the apartment. She looked around but didn't see Chin-mo. It was strange that she was looking for Chin-mo in such a strange place. Finally, she found him in the study. She pushed the door open and saw Chin-mo sitting behind the huge wooden desk. He was holding a cigarette in one hand and flipping through some documents with the other. His fingers were beautiful, slender, and strong. Hee-hwan looked at them eagerly. Then, she thought disappointingly that it had nothing to do with her whether his fingers looked good or not. She stood there and called out to him like a kitten. Chin-mo looked up. In that instant, there was a hint of exhaustion in his eyes. It was pure physical exhaustion. Hee-hwan was stunned. She had never thought that Chin-mo would be tired. In her impression, he was always full of energy. Was it because he was old? She asked in a daze. Chin-mo maintained his original posture. He held the cigarette in his hand and stared at her quietly. After a long time, he smiled. "I'm old." If it was the 33-year-old Hee-hwan, she would have known that it was dangerous. But the 18-year-old was a little ignorant and dumb. She said, 40 is a little old. I remember that you should be 25. Chin-mo got up and walked towards her. His body was tall and straight, slender and powerful. He was very, very masculine. Hee-hwan stammered as he thought about it. Chin-mo walked straight over. He was no more than 10 centimeters away from her. He lowered his head and murmured, "I'm not old at 40. If you don't believe me, we can try." Hee-hwan looked up and stared at him for a few seconds. Then, she covered her face and ran out. As she ran, she shouted, "Chin-mo, you're so shameless." Chin-mo smiled and covered his eyes with his hands. He sighed softly. If she was 18 years old, so be it. At most, the older Hee-hwan would take care of her. At least, he had liked her when she was in her teens. 18 years old was enough. Hee-hwan didn't know his perverted thoughts. She ran into the dining room, turned around, and snorted at Chin-mo, "I'm hungry. Where's the food?" Chin-mo was wearing a black shirt. He didn't look like he was at home at all. However, he still brought out Thai cuisine. It was done very well and it was fragrant. He Huan's eyes lit up, and her voice was soft. Qin Mo, when did you learn that? Qin Mo smiled and sat down. Didn't I say that there are many things you don't know? Oh, He Huan replied. She sat down and couldn't wait to taste it. She felt that every one of her taste buds had been conquered and smoothed. It was too delicious. As he ate, he glanced at Qin Mo from time to time, thinking how amazing he was. Qin Mo didn't say anything and looked indifferent. He Huan ate very quickly. She was satisfied after about 10 minutes, but she still tried to stuff a little more into her mouth. Qin Mo stopped her. It's not good to eat too much. If you want to eat, you can cook tomorrow. He Huan's eyes were sparkling. After a long time, she said, Qin Mo, do you know how to cook French food? Is Italian food okay? And she said a bunch of things. President Qin had been eating. After listening, he calmly wiped his lips. As long as you need it, I can do it. He Huan was stunned again. After a long time, she whispered, really? Chapter 46-66. Qin Mo smiled and said softly, of course. Oh, He Huan replied and got up. Because she was too full, she held her tummy and slowly moved to the sofa in the living room. Then, she did not want to move anymore. Qin Mo finished his meal and did not tidy up. Instead, he walked over and patted her. Go wash the dishes. He Huan lay there and said confidently, I don't know how. Qin Mo reached out and pinched her cheeks. After a long time, he said, you still have to learn. Otherwise, there won't be a feast. He Huan said obediently, let's go out. It'll be a feast too. Qin Mo's reply was to reach out and flick her cheeks. You've learned to be bad. As he said that, he got up helplessly. He Huan asked carefully, are you going to shower? After she asked, she realized that she had asked the wrong word. Hence, she hurriedly said, I said it wrong. I meant, are you going to wash the dishes? He smiled again. What else? He Huan looked at him helplessly. After a long time, she asked softly, are you going to abandon me because I'm not going to wash the dishes? If he did not want her and take her in, she felt that she had nowhere else to go. At that moment, she almost forgot that she had parents and thought that she was born from a rock. After He Huan asked the question, Qin Mo smiled meaningfully. He reached out and patted her head as though he was playing with a puppy. That's possible. Oh, He Huan replied and got up. She was so full and tired. She raised her head to look at Qin Mo, feeling extremely aggrieved. I'll just go wash up. Qin Mo held her back and said in a low voice, let me do it. He Huan was very stubborn this time. She insisted on doing it herself. Even Qin Mo could not hold her back. He thought to himself, this fool. Does she really think that I'll abandon her if she doesn't do some housework? Did she have no faith in him before she turned 18? Qin Mo smiled and followed her, watching her clear the table. This was not a problem for He Huan. She even knew to wipe the table clean. Qin Mo felt like his child had grown up. He leaned on the side with a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at He Huan quietly. He knew that He Huan wouldn't, so he was very lenient with her and only frowned when she smashed a few plates. He didn't tell her that these plates were her favorite. Each of them was a work of art that she brought back from Milan, and each of them cost tens of thousands. Of course, Qin Mo didn't mind. However, He Huan's finger was pricked when she fell on the fifth one. She immediately frowned as she watched the blood ooze out and mix with the water in the pool. Qin Mo's expression changed. He immediately put the coffee in his hand on the counter and walked over to hold her hand. He looked down at her and said, "You were too careless." "Oh," He-Hwan replied. She looked really pitiful, so he didn't want to reprimand her. Chi-Nemo brought her back to the living room and asked her to sit on the sofa while he went to get the first aid kit. When he came back, he sat next to her. The blood had stopped flowing, but the delicate girl kept frowning as if she had been seriously injured. She had always been afraid of pain, and Chi-Nemo knew that. Now he only felt very funny seeing her like this. Chapter 46-67. It wasn't that he didn't feel sorry for her, but she was just too cute. A small wound, as if she was about to leave this world. Just like in the past, when it was just her period and she bled a little, it was as if she had a terminal illness. He-Hwan was a little girl who was afraid of pain. Sometimes she was so cute that she could explode, and sometimes she was so hateful that it made him vomit blood. But now, she was still cute. He decided to be a little more lenient with her. Reaching out, he caressed her forehead gently to comfort her. Then, he opened the first aid kit. It was just a small wound, but Chi-Nemo treated it like a big one. He disinfected it first. It hurt a little, and the delicate girl kept sucking in air. Chi-Nemo couldn't continue. He was speechless and stopped. He-Hwan, are you deliberately making my heart ache? He-Hwan's eyes were wide open as she stared at him. Did I? Why should I make your heart ache? And I didn't do anything. Chi-Nemo was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood again. He glared at her. He-Hwan's voice was as soft as a little lamb. Chi-Nemo, are you angry? He glanced at her. Her voice rang out crisply again. If you're angry, will you take revenge on me? Will you hurt me on purpose? Shut up. His tone was very unpleasant. Then, he bandaged her wound. Yes, as she wished, he hurt her in revenge. Amidst He-Hwan's cries, Chi-Nemo was satisfied. But his girl was crying. She leaned against the sofa angrily, her body twitching. Chi-Nemo wanted to talk to her, but she turned her little face to the side and watched the television out of boredom. At this moment, a saying came to Chi-Nemo's mind, fearless when you're favored. But at times like this, he was still very willing to pamper her. After tidying up, he said casually, I think it would be good to eat a shredded apple after dinner. He-Hwan's ears immediately perked up like a little rabbit. Chi-Nemo didn't seem to notice her reaction and seemed to be talking to himself, but no one will eat it after I make it. I'd better go to the study to work. Someone's eating, He-Hwan shouted. Chi-Nemo smiled, looked at her, and then reached out his hand. He-Hwan stared at him for a long time. Finally, she tilted her little face towards him and let him pinch it like a pet. Only then was he satisfied and got up to do it. He-Hwan was waiting patiently, but after a while, she decided to go to the kitchen to have a look. Chi-Nemo was making it, and he looked very skilled. He-Hwan was in a daze again. He looked so handsome when he was making desserts. Is there anything he can't do, she thought. Chi-Nemo could feel that she was at the door and was peeking at him. He didn't say anything and just let her see. He-Hwan didn't stand on ceremony. When he was done, she wasn't peeking anymore. She leaned over like a little puppy. That look was really quite funny. Do you want to try it? After Chi-Nemo said that, he thought of Enchanting and Yi-Hwan. He sighed in his heart. He was an enlarged Enchanting. He-Hwan was no different from Yi-Hwan now. The only difference was that he only knew how to eat and sleep. But the girl who was looked down on didn't think about anything else. She just wanted to eat. She finished the small bowl in a short while. She even looked at Chi-Nemo when she was done. Chapter 46-68. Chin Mo looked at her and snorted. I don't have enough for today. He Huan looked at him pitifully. I'm not full yet. Chin Mo glanced at her, then his gaze moved downwards, finally landing on a certain little melon-like tummy. He Huan was stunned. After a while, she said, I'm bleeding, so I need to nourish myself. Is that so? He dragged out his words and smiled. I'll cook some red beans for you. They're more nourishing. He Huan glared at him. Her eyes were watery. After a while, she said slowly, Chin Mo, you're poisonous. Chin Mo laughed and pinched her face. A small bowl is enough. You should eat less sweets, or else, he smiled even more meaningfully. You'll get fat. He Huan looked down at her skinny body. She didn't believe him. However, she wouldn't beg him. That would be embarrassing. She ran away. She didn't want to eat red beans. Chin Mo smiled and really cooked a cup of red beans. It wasn't because she had lost some blood, but because her body wasn't feeling well and she needed nourishment. Other than the red beans, he added a few other nourishing things and brought them to the living room. She was watching TV with relish. Chin Mo reached out and hooked He Huan to his side. He brought the cup to her lips. Drink a little. He Huan bit her lip and didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared at the cup. She stared at it. Chin Mo smiled. Drink a little. He Huan frowned. She rejected instinctively. I don't want to drink. Chin Mo stared at her and lowered his voice. Be good. I don't want to be good. He Huan bit her lip and continued to watch TV, ignoring him. Chin Mo was amused. He hooked one arm around her and held her in his arms. With the other hand, he brought the glass to her lips and locked his gaze on hers. He Huan bit her lips and did not say anything for a long time. Chin Mo was still quiet. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, If you don't drink it, I'll kiss you. He Huan's eyes were wide open, and she didn't even dare to breathe. After a while, her face turned red. Chin Mo laughed and reached out to stroke her hair. Breathe. Idiot. He Huan took a few deep breaths, and her eyes were watery. Her voice sounded even more pitiful. Chin Mo, I don't want to drink it. Can you drink it for me? His eyes were still fixed on her, and his meaning was clear. Still, he tapped her lips. Thus, the little girl who hated red beans the most immediately lowered her head and took 2 small sips. She felt so bitter. But compared to Chin Mo's kiss, she would rather drink this. It was terrifying to kiss the 40-year-old Chin Mo. She didn't even dare to think about it. It was a sin to think about it. She drank it aggrievedly. She didn't look up at Chin Mo until the glass was empty. Her eyes were clearly saying, I don't like you anymore. Chin Mo's eyes were tinged with a smile. He reached out to hold her chin and chuckled, Good girl. He Huan bit her lips. You're so annoying. Chin Mo was still smiling lightly, but he suddenly leaned forward and kissed her lightly on the lips. He Huan was stunned. Her mind went blank. He said that he would kiss her if she didn't drink it. But she drank it. Why did he kiss her? Chin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. We're husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss. Husband and wife. Normal. Chapter 46-69. Chin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking. He chuckled. We are husband and wife. It's normal for us to kiss. Husband and wife. Normal. He Huan wondered if other things were normal in his heart. She stared at him for a long time. Chi Nemo patted her head happily. Go take a bath and sleep later. He looked at his watch and reminded her. It's 9 o'clock. Huan looked at him pitifully. Don't adults sleep late? Chi Mo's eyes were tinged with a touch of amusement. You want to sleep late? Huan stared into his eyes as if she was possessed. After about half a minute, she immediately jumped down and ran towards the direction of the bedroom. Chi Nemo still maintained his original posture. He looked at her back and laughed. You're not stupid after all. Actually, she was not stupid. She was very smart. How could Chi Nemo not know that she only accepted him now because she depended on him? He was someone she had known since she was young and he was willing to take care of her. Yu was married and Huan was just looking for comfort. How could it be so easy to fall in love with someone else? If it was so easy, it wouldn't be called love. Actually, he could understand, but his heart still hurt a little. He was also made of flesh and blood. He would also feel pain. Chi Nemo sat quietly for a while and went to the study to smoke. Actually, work was endless. He just sat in the study for a while so that he wouldn't scare her. After all, in Huan's heart, they were not really husband and wife. She would be afraid to sleep together. Chi Nemo sat in the study and smoked quietly. In the master bedroom, Huan lay on the bed for a while. Her little head was pressed against the white bedsheet and her face was rubbing against the high-quality fabric. She felt very comfortable. After lying there for a while, she got up and went to the changing room to get a bathrobe. Her face was a little hot. She didn't know why she was blushing and her heart was warm. She quickly went to take a bath and felt very comfortable all over. Huan closed her eyes and held on to the bathtub. Slowly, she fell asleep. When Chi Nemo returned to the bedroom, he saw such a scene. Huan lay quietly in the bathtub. Her breathing was shallow, and her face was tilted to the side. He was very quiet and obedient. He couldn't help but laugh. He reached out to touch his forehead and went over to pick her up. He also realized that the water in the bathtub was actually cold. He looked at her silently and sighed. Without saying anything, he carried her back to the bedroom. He carefully dried her body and helped her put on the bathrobe. He felt that her body was a little cold. Chi Nemo was worried, so he went to find 2 hot water packs and filled them with 60 degrees Celsius water. He placed them on both sides of her body to warm her up, while he made himself a simple shower. Then, he made a cup of coffee and went to work in the bedroom. That night, he did not dare to sleep, for fear that she would have a fever. But the more one was afraid, the more likely it would happen. Huan's fever started in the latter half of the night. Her forehead was very hot. Chi Nemo measured it for her. It was 39 degrees Celsius. Huan probably wasn't feeling well either. She woke up and opened her eyes. She said in a daze, "Brother." Chi Nemo was stunned for a while before he came back to his senses. She was treating him as a 25-year-old now. His heart throbbed and there was an indescribable softness in it. "You're a little hot. I'll go get some water and medicine." Chapter 4670. Memorized. Chi Nemo was just about to leave and the little girl hugged his waist from behind. "Don't go." Chi Nemo lowered his eyes and looked at the slender fingers on his waist. He said in a low voice, "I'm just going to get something." Leaning against his back, Huan was in a daze. She felt very hot and very cold at the same time. It was extremely uncomfortable. She lowered her eyes and said in a weak voice, "Brother." He grunted in acknowledgement and tilted his head to look at her. You're already so big, yet you're still so clingy. Actually, he couldn't be too harsh on her. She only remembered what happened before she turned 18. At that time, she was just a little girl and didn't know anything. He was the one who taught her how to use sanitary pads. As Chin-emo said this, Hee-hwan hugged him a little tighter. I feel terrible. I want to accompany her. Chin-emo smiled and picked her up. He carried her to the living room like he was carrying a child to get some water and medicine. Fortunately, it was warm everywhere in the house. Chin-emo easily carried her with one hand. She was really too light and too skinny. She was 160 centimeters tall and probably not even 90 centimeters tall. Carrying her was like carrying a small feather. Chin-emo looked down at Hee-hwan and murmured, "You really should eat more." She was so small now that he wanted to feed her, but he didn't want to spoil her. After much difficulty, he took the medicine and poured her a glass of water. It was quite troublesome for him to bring her back to the master bedroom and put her down. Chin-emo sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on her forehead. He felt it quietly and felt that she seemed to be a little hotter. Hee-hwan looked at him helplessly. Will I die? His answer was to pinch her cheeks hard and whisper, nonsense. She still looked pitiful. Brother, I feel terrible. His heart instantly softened. There was still some pain, and his voice was hoarse. I know. I'll be fine after a while. He placed the medicine on his palm and fed it to her. Hee-hwan was especially obedient at this moment. She usually didn't like to take medicine, but she obediently ate it now. Chin-emo looked at her and said softly, "Drink some water." He reached out to support her, let her lean on his shoulder, and carefully fed her the water. Hee-hwan couldn't drink any more after drinking half a cup. She shook her head to indicate that she wanted to take a nap. She slept, but Chin-emo couldn't. He had to watch over her. Hee-hwan lay down, but she didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, she opened her eyes and looked at Chin-emo quietly. Chin-mo's heart was very soft. He reached out his palm and touched her forehead. Why aren't you sleeping? Hee-hwan's face was still abnormally red. She gently moved her head over and rested it on his arm. Then she whispered, I'm scared. As she spoke, her little face was especially fragile. Chin-mo's heart ached, and his voice became even gentler. What are you afraid of? I'm here, aren't I? Hee-hwan stared at him and then said in a hoarse voice, I'm afraid that when I wake up, I won't know what I'll look like. Chin-mo, what if I become a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old? Chin-mo's heart became even gentler. He reached out and brushed her hair with his fingers. Then he said very softly, then I'll help you change your diaper. Hee-hwan slightly widened her eyes. I don't want you to change my diaper. So President Chin smiled and said, Little Mrs. Chin, unfortunately, I changed it for you. Hee-hwan glared at him for a while, then pulled the blanket over her face and said softly, I'm going to sleep. Chapter 46-71. Chin-mo chuckled and tugged at her blanket. Don't suffocate yourself. Hee-hwan stared at him and did not speak for a long time. Chin-mo smiled. All right, there's nothing embarrassing about it. I'm 7 years older than you, isn't it? It's only right for me to take care of a baby younger than me. He was clearly a man in his 40s. Even though he was clearly speaking in a normal manner, Hee-hwan felt as though she was being carefully cared for. She raised her little face and looked at Chin-mo. After a while, she said softly, if I really become a few years older, will you still want me? What do you think? Chin-mo smiled and reached out to caress her forehead. You've been thinking about random things all day. Take a break when you have time. Huan nodded and closed her eyes obediently. Qin Mo looked at her and stayed by her side. After half an hour, he took her temperature. It had dropped a little, and he was finally relieved. After staying by her side for a while, he felt a little sleepy and decided to lean against the headboard so that it would be more convenient for him to look after her. The night was long and short. Qin Mo took her temperature a few times. After that, he used physical methods to lower her fever. Fortunately, her temperature finally dropped when the sun rose. When the first ray of sunlight shone in, Huan opened her eyes and realized that she was sleeping in Qin Mo's arms. He was leaning against the headboard with his clothes on, and she was leaning sideways in his arms. The smell of his body was very pleasant, and it felt very stable. Huan couldn't help but smell for a while longer. Then, she raised her head and wanted to talk to him. However, at that moment, Qin Mo happened to be looking down at her, and she bumped into his chin. Qin Mo grunted and reached out to hold her hair. He said helplessly, "It's early in the morning." Huan grunted. "I want to get up. Sleep with me for a while more." He hugged her as though she was a doll. He reached out and pressed her little head. "I stayed by your side all night last night. I'm exhausted." There was even a hint of complaint in his tone. In his arms, Huan whispered to him, "You didn't sleep the whole night." At this time, all men would pretend to be pitiful. The more pitiful they pretended to be, the more sympathy they would get from women. Qin Mo also knew this kind of trick. He rubbed his brows, and his voice sounded tired. "What do you think?" After saying that, he lowered his head and looked at her quietly. When Huan saw that his eyes were bloodshot, it was obvious that he was suffering. So she said softly, "Actually, you can sleep for a while." "How can I sleep?" He laughed and hugged her again. "All right, sleep with me for a while. Wake up at 10. Now that Huan was not at home and he was working at home for the time being, he could still sleep in. As for the reason why he woke up at 10 a.m., it was because Huan had to sleep too. He had a meeting at 11 a.m. Since he was so insistent, Huan could only accompany him. She thought she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, so she fell into a deep sleep after being hugged by him and smelling his soothing scent. She slept soundly. Qin Mo didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, he looked at her silently for a while before closing his eyes. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the contrary, the little fellow who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a piglet. Qin Mo looked at her silently for a while and smiled. When he sat up, he suddenly felt dizzy. Chapter 46-72. At about 9:50 a.m., he woke up automatically. On the other hand, the little girl who had been clamoring to get up was sleeping like a pig. Qin Mo rubbed his eyebrows and felt a little uncomfortable in his throat. He knew that she must have caught a cold and had a fever. He took the temperature and found that it was 39.5 degrees. He hadn't felt it before. Qin Mo shook his head and smiled helplessly. He got up to find some medicine and took 2 pills. Then, he went to make breakfast for Huan. She had just been sick, so the breakfast he made was light and delicious. However, he felt even more uncomfortable after making it. It didn't matter to him, but he was afraid that he couldn't take care of her. So, Qin Mo called Auntie Lan to take care of her for 2 days. After the call, he was about to wake Huan up when he saw the little girl standing at the door of the master bedroom. She looked dissatisfied. "Qin Mo, you're sick." Her tone was accusatory. Qin Mo found it funny. He put down the phone in his hand and stroked it with his slender fingers. Then, he smiled and said, Yes, I'm sick, so I asked Auntie Lan to take care of you for a few days. Huan was still staring at him. After a while, she said, I've recovered. Now, it's you, Chin Mo, who's sick. He had a look on his face. Huan looked a little proud. I can take care of you too. Oh, Chin Mo said. He found it funny. What can you do? I can learn, she said matter-of-factly. Chin Mo just smiled. Huan bit her lip and walked over. She took his phone and put it in his hand. Are you making a call? Ha! She snorted, what phone call? Tell Auntie Lan not to come. There were stars in Huan's eyes. You have me to take care of you. Don't say, take care of me. Say it again. His voice was a little hoarse. Huan was stunned. You have me. After saying that, she realized that she meant something different. She glared at him. You're taking advantage of me. Chin Mo smiled. We are husband and wife. Isn't that normal? Huan bit her lip and tapped on her phone. Go ahead. Chin Mo stared at her silently. I really hit him. You have to take responsibility. Although she knew that he was taking advantage of her again, Huan acquiesced and nodded with a red face. Chin Mo sighed in his heart. He knew that she was not reliable, but he was still willing to give her a chance, which was also a chance for himself. It was always inconvenient to have one more person in the house. At worst, he could ask someone to send food over. Huan should be able to do other things. As he thought about it, he made another call. Auntie Lan didn't say anything, but Chin Mo's parents knew about Chin Mo's illness and Huan's previous injury. Now that Chin Chen dared to say it, they had to come and see him no matter what. Chin Mo didn't know. After hanging up the phone, he looked at Huan. You eat breakfast? I'm going to have a video conference. Huan stopped him. Let's eat together. He looked at her with amusement. It's an important conference. It's not as important as your health, Huan muttered in a low voice. Huan muttered in a low voice. Perhaps thinking that it was too emotional, she added, if you can't do it, what about me? Who's going to take care of me? Chapter 46-73. Memorize. Chin Mo laughed and pinched her. You're such an exquisite egoist. Huan snorted. You don't have to use adjectives. She thought for a moment and looked at him. Are you going for breakfast or a meeting? President Chin had a strong will to live. Breakfast. Huan nodded in satisfaction. That's more like it. She led the way to the dining room. Chin Mo followed and tugged at her hair. Act like a little adult. Huan glanced at him and said gloomily, I'm 33 years old. Chin Mo smiled and said meaningfully, aren't you 18? Huan sat down. It's useless even if I think about it. Look at my face. It doesn't look like I'm 18 at all. I even saw fine lines in the mirror today. Chin Mo also sat down. He laughed when he heard her say that. That's nothing. As he spoke, he really looked at her face. In fact, Huan looked really young. She looked like she was about 22 or 23 years old. She didn't look like she was 33 years old at all. Of course, women were always particularly concerned about their own appearance, and their requirements were also higher. Especially for an exquisite egoist like Huan. If she wasn't beautiful, Chin Mo probably wouldn't want her. He could have many young ladies like this. The more Huan thought about it, the more she felt a sense of crisis. She felt that she had to take care of Chin Mo when he was sick. She became even more attentive. She spread the jam on the bread and brought out the milk. Chin Mo held the milk and smiled. I just took my medicine. I can't drink milk. He Huan looked at him and quickly poured him a glass of water. Is this okay? Chin Mo was still smiling. He drank half a glass and started breakfast. It was already 11 o'clock. The executives of King Entertainment, even those overseas, had stayed up all night waiting for Chin Mo. At this time, Chin Mo and his little wife were having breakfast together. Well, it wasn't much, just half an hour. However, the higher-ups on the other side were all sweating profusely. They didn't know who President Chin was angry with. Maybe it was themselves. How terrifying. Chin Mo ate something and felt better. He was about to go to the meeting when He Huan stopped him again. Let me take your temperature again. President Chin could only continue to sit there and watch He Huan run around to get the thermometer and stuff it under his armpit. She didn't hold back at all. Chin Mo said helplessly, He Huan, why do I feel like you're running a house? He Huan looked at him with her big watery eyes. Don't talk. Chin Mo was even more amused. What will happen if I tell you? You won't be able to speak properly. She spoke very softly, as if she was afraid of disturbing the thermometer. Suddenly, Chin Mo felt sour and bitter. He called her a little idiot. Then, he ignored the thermometer and pulled He Huan into his arms. He Huan was a little stunned. Her little face was about to change shape. She asked very softly, Chin Mo, what's wrong? His voice was indescribable. He said in a low and deep voice, how can there be a little idiot like you? He Huan replied with an oh. Then, her little face became even more distorted. She had difficulty breathing and her little face was a little red. She couldn't take it anymore. She raised her little fist and hit his shoulder. Chin Mo, let go of me. Chapter 46-74. He looked down and laughed. Without saying anything, he put her down. He took out the thermometer and looked at it. Luckily, it was 39 degrees, a little lower. He put it aside. It's much better. Let's go to the meeting. But it's 39 degrees. He Huan didn't agree. Chin Mo pinched her little nose. Mrs. Chin, I have to support my family. Then, he took her into the study. Sit here. If you feel something is wrong, you can stop it. He Huan could accept this. Then, she sat on the sofa behind him and played games on her phone. Chin Mo turned on the video conference. He didn't mind that there were people in his study. Therefore, all the executives were absent-minded during the meeting. President Chin was having a meeting with his wife. Moreover, Mrs. Chin seemed to be very engrossed in her game. They wanted to play games too. They wanted to throw away their computers, but they had no choice. When they saw President Chin's handsome face, they felt that they had to work harder. When Chin Mo was in the middle of the meeting, the doorbell rang. He Huan was playing games, so she didn't hear it. Instead, Chin Mo heard it. He tilted his head. Huan, go and open the door. The executives on the other side of the video conference were shocked. Huan. All of them instantly melted. He Huan put down her phone calmly and ran to open the door. When the door opened, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she greeted Mrs. Chin and Mr. Chin affectionately. At the door, Chin Anlin and Yi Liangqiu were naturally worried about their son and daughter-in-law. When they heard the two greetings, they had mixed feelings. Although they had heard about He Huan from Qin Chen, they still felt a little emotional when they saw her in person. Especially Yi Liangqiu. Ever since the incident with Su Ilio, no matter how hard she tried to mend her relationship with He Huan, it was no longer what it used to be. Now that He Huan called her mother Su, her eyes were filled with tears. Perhaps the heavens took pity on him and allowed him to restart everything. Yi Liangqiu nodded, took He Huan's hand, and said to Qin Anlin, "Go and see your workaholic son. I'll chat with Huan for a while." In his ecstasy, he didn't even want to smash it anymore. Qin Anlin rubbed his nose. He also felt a little helpless. His wife was also very emotional. He walked to the study, and Yi Liangqiu and He Huan went to the sofa together. He Huan only remembered what happened before she turned 18, so she was quite affectionate and lively. Yi Liangqiu also had daughters, but now all of them had grown up. Qin Mu was a little bored and wasn't by her side. Qin Chen was even more manly than other men. How could he find a cute girl like He Huan? Yi Liangqiu really doted on He Huan since she was young. Not only did she love He Huan, but it was also because of Su Qing. Chapter 46-75. 1 second to remember. On one hand, Yi Liangqiu hated He Huan for not striving for success, but on the other hand, she felt that He Huan was even more adorable. She had to buy things for her so that she could be worthy of his love. Women were all impulsive. At the thought of this, Yi Liangqiu immediately went to Qin Mo's study. Because of Qin Anlin's arrival, the meeting had to be interrupted. Fortunately, everything that should be discussed had been discussed. At this time, Qin Mo and Qin Anlin were sitting on the sofa, chatting leisurely. They looked especially relaxed, as if he was not sick, and He Huan did not lose her memory and return to 18 years old. Everything was so good, quiet and beautiful. Yi Liangqiu suddenly felt that this was a gift from the heavens. It was to return Qin Mo's original love. She stood by the door and smiled. "You guys talk, I will take He Huan out for a walk. She has been staying in the hospital for a few days, so she must be bored. Moreover, she is at the age where she likes to go out." Qin Mo's gaze fell on his mother's face with some curiosity. He seemed to understand something and then smiled. "Okay, remember to take 2 people out." Yi Liangqiu grunted in acknowledgement and left. Meanwhile, Qin Mo picked up the tea in his hand and gently sipped it, as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, a small head popped out from the door and said in a crisp voice, "Qin Mo, I'm going out." He looked at her with amusement. "Didn't you say that you would take care of me?" He Huan made a face. "Daddy Qin is here." Qin Mo frowned and wanted to correct her, but after thinking for a while, he relaxed his eyebrows and didn't say anything. He just stood up and took out a black gold card from the drawer and put it in her palm. "Swipe the card yourself." "Oh," He Huan replied. She felt as if she was raised by someone. In fact, most of her expenses were borne by Qin Mo since she was a child, so she didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. But she still had to ask clearly. "How much is there?" If it wasn't enough, he would lose face. Qin Mo couldn't help but laugh. "Just swipe if it's less than 100 million. If it's more than that, call Secretary He. She'll help you settle it." 100 million. He Huan muttered softly, "I'm not buying a helicopter." Qin Mo smiled, then casually said, "It's my birthday in a month. You can buy me a present, no matter how expensive it is." He Huan blurted out, 40. Qin Mo just stared at her and didn't speak for a long time. He Huan grinned. 40 isn't something to be ashamed of. Qin Mo was still gnashing his teeth. He Huan, you can be even more despicable. He Huan stuck out her tongue and didn't say anything else. Chi Nemo rubbed her little head. Have a good meal outside. I'll cook something delicious for you when you come back tonight. His words warmed He Huan's heart. She whispered, I'll cook for you when I get back. He immediately laughed out loud. You're so nice. Yeah. She looked up at him, a little dazed. Chi Nemo didn't say anything either. After a while, she said in a coy voice, I'm leaving. Once again, Chi Nemo was like a little puppy who kept kissing her. As for the two elders present, they were forcefully showered with dog food. But again, perhaps this was God's arrangement. He Huan still went out with Yi Liangqiu happily. She called her Mama Qin and was even closer to her than her own mother, laughing like a pig. The saddest thing was that after going all out in the morning, they really did bump into He Huan's mother during lunch. Su Cheng. Chapter 46-76. Su Cheng still did not know that He Huan had lost her memory. She only knew that she was injured. Coincidentally, she was not in B City these few days, so she came back and met her. She wanted to go up to her immediately, but just as she was about to go over, she heard He Huan calling her Mama Qin. Su Cheng felt that something was wrong. He Huan and Qin Mo were married again. Even if she called him Mama Qin because of emotional problems, how could they be so affectionate? Su Cheng was only one table away from where they were eating. After listening quietly for a while, she finally realized that something was wrong. He Huan's expression and tone were very strange. She did not look like an adult at all. She was talking about girly things. She was basically a young girl, and Yi Liangqiu doted on her very much. It was a good thing for a daughter to be doted on by her mother-in-law. However, Su Cheng did not think that it was a good thing for her to be doted on like this. Why could an old mother not stand it anymore? She came over and sat down. He Huan was stunned for a moment when she came and did not react for a while. However, Yi Liangqiu immediately understood. Looking at Su Cheng's expression, she probably guessed something, so she did not hide it. Su Cheng, He Huan doesn't remember anything after she was 18. Su Cheng was stunned. Although she felt that it was a little strange, she did not expect it to be like this. After a while, she said in a low voice, What happened? Yi Liangqiu sighed. It seems that a fanatic did it. Qin Mo did not fulfill his responsibility. Don't worry, we will take good care of Huan Huan. Su Cheng was still stunned. After a long time, she came back to her senses. Then, she murmured, if she was 18, she was not married yet. I should have brought her back to take care of her. Ha! Yi Liangqiu did not expect that Su Cheng would have such a way of thinking. The memory stopped at 18, but He Huan and Qin Mo were married. If Su Cheng really took her back, what would happen to Qin Mo? Her son was already 40 years old and was still waiting for his birthday present. If he was taken away, Yi Liangqiu would not be able to explain it. Therefore, Yi Liangqiu was naturally unwilling. But on this matter, Su Cheng was very insistent. Actually, it was very simple. As a mother, when she thought about her 18-year-old daughter's mentality, how much of a disadvantage she would have to suffer alone with a 40-year-old man like Qin Mo, it was enough for her to be very forceful. He Huan was a little confused. In fact, she had spent more time with the Qin family before she turned 18, so she was closer to Yi Liangqiu. He Huan was actually a little afraid of Su Cheng's persistence. She shrank back a little towards Yi Liangqiu. A small hand gently tugged at Yi Liangqiu's sleeve. How could a veteran like Yi Liangqiu not know what a little girl was thinking? So she patted the back of her hand to comfort her. Then, she looked up and discussed with Su Qing gently. The two children get along very well. These days, Qin Mo has been taking care of them. They grew up together. What are you worried about? Su Qing smiled. There was always a hint of sharpness in her smile. She was not a sharp-tongued person. She and Yi Liangqiu had been through trials and tribulations in the past, but Su Qing could not let go of the things that had happened before. Compared with Qin Mo, He Huan was too weak. This was a patriarchal society. No matter how famous He Huan was, the He family's fate was still in Qin Mo's hands. Therefore, Su Qing was very worried. Chapter 4677. Updated quickly, no pop-up windows, and free reading. The two sides were in a deadlock. Finally, Yi Liangqiu called Qin Mo and made an appointment to talk to him in a clubhouse. Su Qing wanted to see Qin Mo at this time. President Qin, on the other hand, had to make the appointment even if he had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius and was busy with work. An hour later, Qin Mo came to the private room of Elan Clubhouse alone. After all, there was only Su Qing, and he didn't want to see the whole Qin family. When he opened the door, it was a private room. Yi Liangqiu was greeting He Huan and Su Qing. It was a bit hard to be the host, but it wasn't Su Cheng's fault. It was Qin Mo's fault. Qin Mo went in and greeted Su Qing and his mother respectively. Then, he sat beside He Huan and patted her head without saying anything. Su Qing was enraged. How was this any different from treating a pet? However, she couldn't lose her temper because there was a little girl in front of her, so she was still obedient. Su Qing complained in her heart, what a spineless guy. He Huan, on the other hand, looked at Qin Mo with anxiety in his eyes. To her, Qin Mo was like an old bird, and she was a little bird. She felt at ease living with him, and she didn't want to change anything. Or perhaps, she instinctively wanted a little sense of security. Qin Mo poured a cup of tea for Su Qing respectfully and calmly told her about He Huan's injury and her future recovery. He needed Qin Chen's help, so he said a lot. Su Cheng's mind started to work. Although she was at a disadvantage now, if He Huan couldn't remember in the future, Qin Mo would be better. After talking for about an hour, Su Qing gave up and sighed. Let's go with Qin Mo. All the helplessness he felt was for the sake of his daughter's future, even if there was a chance. Besides, He Huan looked very happy. As a mother, how could she have the heart to ruin her daughter's happiness? Maybe it was a good thing that she forgot. Later, they had dinner together, and Kaim came to pick up Su Qing. When they got home, they naturally talked about it. He Huan went back with Qin Mo, while Yi Liangqiu and Qin Anlin went back to Liang Garden. As soon as they returned to the apartment, Qin Mo's body temperature rose to 40 degrees Celsius. His stomach problems flared up again, and he knew that he would have to go to the hospital and perhaps undergo surgery. However, he didn't want to scare her, so he just took his medicine and went to bed early. This time, He Huan obediently leaned against him and didn't cause trouble for him. She was afraid that he would die. In the middle of the night, Qin Mo woke up. He woke up in pain. His forehead was full of sweat, and his stomach felt like it was on fire. He closed his eyes and calmed down for a while. Then, he got up quietly and didn't dare to wake He Huan up. He went to find the medicine and took it. Then, he went outside and called Qin Chen to ask her to come over. Qin Chen was sleeping. In the middle of the night, she was dug up again. She wanted to curse, but she couldn't help it. After all, Qin Mo was her second brother. Qin Chen got up soon and drove back to the hospital. She knew Qin Mo's body very well. When she arrived at Qin Mo's apartment, it was already an hour later. In the study, she gave him a painkiller and sneered. I thought you weren't afraid of pain. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to give me a painkiller. Chin Mo glanced at her. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Chapter 46-78. Qin Chen could not help but roll his eyes. I know. He Huan is your darling, all right. She thought that Qin Mo would not admit it. Qin Mo was a man who liked to be a man but did not like to talk about it. He was a rather reserved man. But at this moment, after enduring the pain, he felt much more comfortable. He leaned back on the sofa and said in a low voice, Isn't she my darling now? Qin Chen could not take it anymore. Qin Mo, can't you keep a lower profile? Qin Mo smiled meaningfully. I'm your wife. Why should I keep a low profile? Qin Chen smiled. He Huan is getting smaller. Second brother, you're getting younger too. Qin Mo looked at her and harumphed. Then, he closed his eyes. Give me another shot. You don't have to come tomorrow. Qin Chen was speechless. How can you do that? Painkillers are not commonly used and you want 2 shots in a row. Are you trying to damage your nerves? As she said that, she took out a box of medicine. Be good and take your medicine. You should be fine once your fever subsides. She sighed. You should go to the hospital to take care of your illness. Qin Mo closed his eyes and waved. Take care. I won't see you out. Qin Chen kicked him angrily. How can you be like this? Burning bridges after crossing the river. Even though she was angry, she still cared about him. She reached out and laid him down. You should be fine after a good night's sleep. I'm not going back today. Qin Mo felt much better. He closed his eyes. Go to the guest room. Qin Chen smiled. I'll sleep with He Huan. Her brother opened his eyes immediately and frowned. Qin Chen did it on purpose. We're both girls. What's the matter? Qin Mo sized up his sister from head to toe. She had neat short hair and handsome facial features. She wore a black shirt and black trousers. She casually wore a jacket on the outside. She was even more handsome than a man. Qin Mo didn't want to imagine such a sister lying together with his wife. He couldn't accept it, so he got up and said, I'll go back to my room. You can sleep here. It's still warm. Qin Chen hugged the blanket in disgust. I've worked so hard to come here, and I'm going to sleep here. Qin Mo put on a fake smile and asked her in return, what else would you do? Sleep with He Huan like this? That scene was enough to catch me in the act. A guy who seduced second sister-in-law. Qin Chen was speechless. He lay down and said, You're too stingy. It's not like I didn't sleep with He Huan when I was young. Qin Mo glared at her. Don't even think about it now. As he spoke, he went out and returned to the master bedroom. He Huan was still sleeping, the kind that smelled good. Qin Mo chuckled soundlessly. His chuckle was somewhat helpless. She could still sleep soundly in this situation. She was really a little pig. He lay down and turned his head to look at her. He Huan must have felt the heat from him. She leaned over and even called out his name. Instantly, Qin Mo's heart calmed down. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He kissed her and said in a hoarse voice, Good night. He Huan knew nothing about it. She was still in her sweet sleep. It was a dream that belonged to her when she was 18. She woke up at dawn and saw Qin Mo in a black shirt. She wrinkled her nose and said, Chin Mo, why didn't you change into your pajamas? His little nose sniffed like a puppy, and then he said in a low voice, you smell like medicine. Chin Mo smiled faintly and wanted to say something. Chin Chen leaned against the door of the master bedroom handsomely. Good morning, sweetheart. Chapter 46-79. When Huan heard the voice, she looked up from Chin Mo's arms and saw Chin Chen in a black shirt, leaning against the door with a cup of coffee in his hand. Those long legs were enough to make one's nose bleed, and that slightly messy short hair was simply, if not for the fact that she knew that Chin Chen was a woman, Huan felt that she would have fallen for him immediately. However, Huan had her own plans. She did not immediately fall in love with Chin Mo, but she was stunned by Chin Chen, which meant that Chin Chen was more handsome than Chin Mo. Just the thought of it made her look at Chin Mo sadly. Chin Mo had never been nice to Go Urseo's sister. He got up and walked over, kicking the door shut without any expression on his face. Then, he turned around and said to his silly wife, Chin Chen is a woman. No matter how handsome she is still a woman. She can't give you happiness. Huan sat on the bed. She was so small and she looked quite cute. She blinked her eyes and looked cute. It's good to look at him. After she said that, she saw Chin Mo's expression change. There was something unknown in his eyes. His eyes were clear and bright, as though he was doing something bad. Huan was too young to understand, so she could only stare at him blankly. Her body also moved unnaturally. She wanted to escape, but Chin Mo would not allow her to. He pressed her head down. They were too close to each other, and Huan was very uncomfortable. Her head moved in his hand. Chin Mo pressed her head down and asked in a low voice, I'm not good looking, huh? Huan was shocked and stammered, you're good looking. Then, why do you want to look at Chin Chen? Is he better looking than me? His handsome face was getting closer, as though he wanted her to see him more clearly. Huan's eyes widened. She bit her lip, not knowing what to do. Chin Mo narrowed his eyes. Say something. You look just as good. Xiaowan had learned her lesson and squeezed out a fake smile. President Qin was not satisfied. He pinched her chin and continued to interrogate her, am I prettier or Chin Chen? Or add Rongyu? Actually, the three of them were easier to choose. At least, they wouldn't offend anyone. Huan stared at him for a long time before slowly saying, Chin Chen is the best looking, followed by you and Rongyu. After she finished speaking, she carefully looked at Chin Mo. Chin Mo smiled. You're not stupid. Huan heaved a sigh of relief and said, I just don't know if he's telling the truth. Of course it's true. Huan immediately said obsequiously, it's definitely true. I don't lie. Chin Mo's expression brightened up a lot. In fact, it was not difficult to understand this kind of mentality. His imaginary enemy had always been Rongyu. At this moment, how could he care about his sister? Huan immediately jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom after she passed the first test. As she brushed her teeth, she recalled how Chin Chen looked just now with a blushing face. Actually, Chin Chen was the best looking. Even if he was a woman, it was good to look at him. Huan continued to brush her teeth. As she brushed her teeth, she suddenly remembered something. She looked up at the mirror for a few seconds. Then, with the foam still in her mouth, she opened the door and said to Chin Mo, why is Chin Chen here? It was a little strange to be wearing a shirt and drinking coffee so early in the morning. Chin Mo was putting on his tie. When he heard her voice, he turned around. He came over at night. Huan roughly guessed it. She brushed her teeth fiercely and asked with her mouth full of foam. Chin Mo, did you get sick last night? Chin Mo did not deny it, nor did he say anything. He just looked at her quietly. He Huan's reaction was very strange. She brushed her teeth fiercely again and went to the bathroom to rinse her mouth. When she came out again, she fell into Chin Mo's arms. It was like 2 ribs were embedded in his arms. It was a little painful, but the pain was also warm. It turned into a little one that stayed in his arms peacefully. Chin Mo lowered his head and looked at her, his voice gentle. What's wrong? He Huan hugged him and buried her face in his chest. She asked him gloomily, why didn't you tell me that you were sick? Chin Mo smiled gently. You're not a doctor. That sounded right, but it was also wrong. He Huan was not a little fool. She bit her lower lip. But, I have to take care of you. Qin Chen is enough. He lowered his head. Moreover, you're just getting better. You need to rest, don't you? He Huan always felt that there was something wrong with his words. Later, she found out that it was because in his heart, she had always been the one being taken care of. She didn't need to participate in anything he did. He treated her like a child. Later, she slowly became dissatisfied with his childlike attitude. But at this moment, He Huan still enjoyed the feeling of being doted on. She didn't think that there was anything wrong with Chin Mo's attitude. She nodded slowly and raised her head. You should be fine now, right? Chin Mo nodded and continued to tie his tie. He said, I have to go to the office later. You stay at home. I'll get Qin Chen to accompany you. She only goes to work in the afternoon. He Huan followed behind him. Does Qin Chen know how to cook? Unexpectedly, when the door opened, Qin Chen was leaning against the door. He raised his glass at He Huan and winked. I know how to review. Qin Mo rolled his eyes at his sister's humor. Then he said to He Huan, her cooking is comparable to that of a Michelin chef. He Huan's eyes sparkled. Could she change her husband? Qin Chen smiled again and put the coffee cup in He Huan's hand. The coffee I make is also top-notch. Do you want to try it? She had already made breakfast. Qin Mo walked over and said calmly, she's not in good health. Besides, his eyes fell on his sister's face quietly. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, don't give her coffee. Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. He Huan stared at them and felt that they were a little strange. Qin Chen patted her and sat down. Have breakfast. I'll accompany you in the morning. Second brother should be back at noon. After saying that, she looked at Qin Mo thoughtfully. Qin Mo laughed. I'm fine. He Huan looked at them. She wanted to ask but did not dare to. She was living in the world of 2 adults. To others, she was just a little kid. Suddenly, she felt nostalgic. If she became a director, would she be on equal footing with Qin Mo? Of course, it was just wise idea. Before she lost her memory, He Huan was still depressed. Qin Mo was really busy. He left after breakfast. Qin Chen accompanied him for breakfast. She looked up and saw He Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Chapter 4680. She looked up and saw He Huan stuffing bread into her mouth as she stared blankly in the direction of the window. Qin Chen found it funny. He picked up his cup and took a sip of coffee. Then, he asked casually, He Huan, do you still like Rongyu? He Huan exclaimed and came back to her senses. She stared at Qin Chen for a while and stammered, why do you ask that? Qin Chen smiled. You liked Ronyu until you were 24 years old. Then, you started to like Qin Mo, she suddenly said. Actually, think about it now. Do you like Ronyu or Qin Mo? She added, I think you've always liked Qin Mo. They look alike. When you were 16, you told Qin Mu secretly that you wanted to marry Qin Mo when you grew up. He Huan still remembered this embarrassing incident. Her face was burning hot. She almost did not dare to recall that she had said such embarrassing things in the past. Qin Chen smiled even more when he saw that she was embarrassed. She loved to tease young girls. Moreover, it was He Huan, whom she had always liked. Qin Chen had a preference for He Huan's appearance. It was fun to tease beautiful young girls. Especially when the other party was his second sister-in-law. Qin Chen was very good at seducing his second sister-in-law. So, Qin Chen said a lot more about He Huan's adulthood scandals. He Huan wanted to find a hole to hide in. Qin Chen was finally satisfied. He smiled and let her go. The two of them, one big and one small, lay on the sofa and watched TV after breakfast. Both of them were not serious and just watched TV casually. Later, the guy who seduced the second sister-in-law even pulled He Huan into his arms. Disappointingly, He Xiaowan did not refuse. There was a surveillance camera installed in the house. After the meeting, CEO Qin came back and saw it. He was furious. When he returned to the apartment, his younger sister and his second sister-in-law were lying on the sofa together. The two of them smelled good together. Qin Mo was speechless. He felt like he was caught red-handed. However, even if she was angry, what could she do? Qin Chen was a woman. Qin Chen was chased away by his elder brother. He didn't even give him lunch and kicked him out mercilessly. After cleaning up the door, he looked at the little guy again. He had just woken up from a sound sleep, and he even stretched his body. Qin Mo didn't look too good. You're awake. He Huan grunted in acknowledgement, looking like she was in a daze. She rubbed her eyes and asked Qin Mo, where is Qin Chen? Qin Mo didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. For some reason, He Huan immediately understood. She stuttered and explained, it's not what you think. Qin Mo gritted his teeth. Of course there's nothing wrong with my sister's sexual orientation. But for you, I can't guarantee anything. He Huan exploded. Of course there's nothing wrong with me. Prove it to me. Qin Mo's voice was emotionless, and so was his gaze. He Xiaowan was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she asked him slowly, how do I prove it? Qin Mo's voice became softer. Prove that you like men. Prove that there's nothing wrong with you. Now, kiss me. Ha! He Huan never knew that there was such a trick. Kissing him was just to prove that there was nothing wrong with her. There was nothing wrong with her in the first place, okay? She didn't want to prove it. Why should she prove it to him? He was the one who was sick. Chapter 4681. He Huan stared at him and bit her lip. Why should I kiss you? Can kissing you prove it? Of course it can. Qin Mo said confidently and then moved forward. He Huan looked at the magnified handsome face and her heart suddenly started beating wildly. She couldn't say a word and just stared at his lips. There was only one word in her mind, kiss him. She really kissed him. Just one kiss and then she left. Qin Mo didn't deepen the kiss and let her leave, but his eyes deepened a lot. He Huan kissed him and her heart beat faster. She looked at him in a daze. After a long time, she found her voice. Can I prove it now? Chi Nemo gently touched his lips with his fingers and his heart skipped a beat. He smiled and said slowly, "Save it for the future. This is too far away." Ah. Huan was in a trance. Chi Nemo just smiled and put his arm around her shoulder. "Have you eaten?" Huan wrinkled her little nose when he mentioned this. "You chased Qin Chen away. I'll cook for you." President Qin gently coaxed his little wife. Huan bit her lower lip. "I've been looking forward to the whole morning when you say that Qin Chen does better than Michelin. She would do whatever Qin Chen wanted. Now he chased him away." President Qin was very distressed. But looking at Huan's pitiful and expectant expression, he sighed and finally called his sister. "Chen Chen, come back for a while." On the other side, Qin Chen didn't actually leave. He was leaning against the door. She knew the 18-year-old Huan too well. She was willful and had to get what she wanted. As for Qin Mo, he would probably grant her every request. Therefore, when the phone rang, she was not surprised at all. She hung up the phone and knocked on the door. Huan was disappointed and looked at Qin Mo as if he was useless. However, when he heard the knock on the door, Huan immediately trotted over. When the door was opened, she saw Qin Chen's good-looking face. Huan immediately hugged her arm and said, "So you didn't leave." Qin Chen was amused and pinched her face. "If I leave, someone will probably drag me out of the operating room to cook a meal for some girl even if they chase me to the hospital." Huan's face suddenly turned red. She bit her lip for a long time before she said, "It's not like I have to eat it." Qin Chen just smiled. It was a meaningful smile, and he looked at his brother again. Qin Mo, on the other hand, was very calm. "I'm going to the study." Qin Chen snorted and grabbed Huan. "Come and watch me cook." Xiaohuan followed him in a daze. Later, in the kitchen, Xiaohuan exclaimed from time to time, "Wow! Wow! Wow!" Qin Mo walked out of the study and looked impatient. "The kitchen is not a circus. Qin Chen, you can cook. You don't need to." Before he finished speaking, Qin Mo's eyes also widened. Qin Chen smiled indifferently. "I'm cooking imperial dishes from the Qin dynasty today." "Qin Mo, you probably don't like these fancy things." Qin Mo looked over there for a long time before he coughed lightly. "Sometimes, I can make do with it." Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. The knife she used was specially made. The slices she cut were as thin as snowflakes, and the fruit carvings were as exquisite as works of art. Huan was still making silly sounds, and Qin Mo was too lazy to correct her. Chapter 4682. By the time Qin Chen was done cooking, it was already an hour later. There were 4 dishes and 2 sets of imperial pastries, which could not be found outside. Qin Chen could not make it in time as she had surgery. When they left, Huan was a little reluctant. Indeed, he was handsome, gentle, and could cook. He was the upgraded version of Qin Mo. Huan felt it was a pity that Qin Chen was a woman. She did not know that she was sighing. Qin Mo's voice sounded dangerously. "If Qin Chen was a man, what would you do?" Huan was shocked. She turned to look at Qin Mo and stammered, "I don't want anything." Then, she added, "What can I do?" Qin Mo covered her mouth with his and glanced at her. "Don't even think about it." "I know, it's a sin to think about it." Huan bit her lips and snorted. Qin Mo was a little unhappy at first, but now he laughed softly and reached out to pinch her little face. "You dare to talk back?" "How would I dare?" He Huan was still gloomy. After a while, she looked at Qin Mo and thought of something. If she doesn't eat in the morning, will she starve to death? It's okay even if she doesn't eat for 2 days. Qin Mo teased her. He Huan glanced at him. Is she a camel? Qin Mo thought for a while and replied seriously, she might not have a camel, so Huan, you might have such a function. He Huan stared at him and only realized what he was talking about after a minute. She glared at him and blushed. After that, she was not very willing to talk to him and just ate gloomily. Qin Mo smiled. After a while, he teased her again. Where's the present you bought for me yesterday? He Huan made an "ah" sound and remembered. She pouted and said, I met my mother. She always sounded a little delicate when she spoke. Qin Mo's heart softened. He looked at her and asked her in a low voice, then tell me, if I don't go, will you go home with your mother? Or will you insist on being with me? Ayaya, they were obviously an old couple, but talking about this now felt like it was like talking about their first love. Qin Mo had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He Huan let out an "ah" and lowered her head. After a while, she seemed to remember something. You're here. He didn't say much, just 4 words. You're here. Qin Mo reached out and gently caressed her face before saying hoarsely, silly. I'm not stupid. He Huan whispered. Qin Mo smiled. Why did you come back with me if you weren't stupid? He Huan did not say anything, but there was a touch of moisture in her eyes. Qin Mo knew that he had gone overboard with his joke. He pinched her face gently. I'll take you shopping later. He Huan was a little worried. Weren't you feeling unwell last night? He smiled and said gently, I'm much better now. He Huan made an "oh" sound and ate her food gloomily. Qin Mo knew her temper. She must be angry. So, he reached out and held her hand gently. He said softly, I won't do it again. She didn't say anything. She was still a little dejected. In fact, he understood that she couldn't let go of him. She had Rongyu in her heart, but living with him was a kind of compromise. She probably couldn't accept herself in this way. Qin Mo felt a little heartache and held her hand. His voice was a little hoarse. We are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me, not Rongyu. Chapter 4683. Qin Mo's heart ached a little. He held her hand and said in a hoarse voice, we are husband and wife. Even if your memory is only 18 years old, your body is already 33 years old. We have been husband and wife for many years. You belong to me. You have never belonged to Rongyu. For some reason, He Huan's heart suddenly relaxed when he said that. She felt indescribably relaxed. Perhaps she was afraid that something would happen between her and Rongyu later. She replied obediently and then finished the rest of the dishes. Her little belly was round from eating. Therefore, Qin Mo often called his sister over to cook for him. Qin Chen complained a lot. She was the world's top chief surgeon for a surgery that cost tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. Her second brother asked her to cut vegetables, but Lan Yu only ate a few times. However, Qin Mo had a way to get her to come over. Cooking every now and then was something that happened later. At this moment, He Huan's stomach was full and she didn't want to move. In the end, she still took a good afternoon nap with Qin Mo. When she woke up, Qin Mo was still there. He was leaning against the headboard and playing with his phone. He seemed to be sending messages to the company's executives. Juan woke up and felt lazy all over. She didn't want to move at all. Therefore, she still lay in his arms and said softly, "Mo, if you are busy, don't go out. It's just a routine. Secretary, his arrangements are the same. I was just waiting for you to wake up." He said softly and then kissed her. He got up and put on a sweater and coat for her. He did the same for himself, took his wallet and walked out. Juan followed beside him and said softly, "I didn't bring any money or card." Mo pressed the elevator button and then looked at her. "Come out with me. You don't need to bring your card." Juan nodded. Thinking about it, it made sense. Her money was also his money. There was no difference. When the elevator reached the first floor, Mo took her to a car. Juan looked at him and then at the car, feeling that something was different. Only later did she realize that he seemed to be particularly dazzling today. Usually, he was already very good-looking, but today, he seemed to be more particular. Well, if he had to describe it, he seemed to be a little better looking than Chin. Juan stared at him without blinking. Mo smiled. "What's wrong?" Juan said softly, "You're a little different today." Mo smiled and pinched her cheek. "It's good that you like it." Juan replied in a low voice, "I didn't say I liked it." His gaze was a little deep. "If you don't like it, why are you staring at it in a daze? You're even drooling." Juan subconsciously reached out to touch her lips, only to realize that she had been tricked. She glared at Mo laughed. "I said you're silly." Juan snorted and glared at him. Mo smiled and opened the car door for her. Juan got into the car and turned to look at him. "Mo, where are we going?" "We're going to buy a gift first, then we'll have dinner together to celebrate twin breaking 2 billion. Mo said with a smile as he fastened his seatbelt. Juan was stunned. 2 billion. Really? I still can't believe it. It's 2019, director he. Mo looked at her sideways. "It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have the talent." Chapter 4684. 2019, director he. Mo turned his head and looked at her. "It would be better if you were willing to direct commercial films. Actually, you have the talent." Juan was still in disbelief. After a long time, she said softly, "But I don't remember it at all." "I'll teach you," Mo said straightforwardly. Juan bit her lip. "Really? But you're usually so busy with work." Mo smiled. "Time can be squeezed out." With that said, he ruffled her hair again and started the car. After driving for a while, he suddenly said, "Fasten your seatbelt, idiot." Juan nodded and quietly fastened her seatbelt. Then, she looked very obedient. Mo was driving. He was very focused on the car, but he smiled slightly. After that, Juan didn't say much. She looked out the window and after a while, she turned to look at Mo. "Mo, what kind of gift do you want?" Mo was wearing a white shirt and a thin sweater. His slender fingers were holding the steering wheel, and he looked very pleasing to the eye. Juan was a little dazed. Just as she was in a daze, Mo said, "What I want, you might not be willing to give it to me." With that said, he turned his head and looked at her. Juan's face immediately heated up, so much so that it was burning hot. She was already 18 years old mentally. How could she not understand what he was saying? But she pretended not to understand even if she did. Huan's face turned red again and again. In the end, she could only turn her little face to the other side. Nemo smiled and didn't force her. He just reached out and held her hand while driving. His voice was low and husky, which was unique to men of his age. "When the time comes, just let me know," he said with a smile. Then, he let go of her hand. Huan bit her lip. She held her hand gently and felt a wave of heat in her palm. It was the temperature of Mo's palm. It was clearly only warm, but at that moment, Huan felt an indescribable heat. She stole a glance at him, and immediately averted her face. Mo was driving. He noticed his little wife's behavior from the corner of his eye. He just felt that it was interesting and cute. After a while, his voice was elegant. "Have you thought it through?" "What?" Huan's voice was slightly hoarse from her nervousness. She turned her head and stared at him. Completely, like a helpless little rabbit. Mo smiled. "Birthday present. What else do you think I'm talking about?" There was a faint smile in his voice, as well as a hint of mockery. Xiaowan was a little annoyed, but she was more annoyed because she was at a loss for what to do. She seemed to be under his control. Therefore, she did not answer his question for a long time. She did not know how to answer him. She could only sulk, but she was also very cute when she sulked. As Mo watched, he felt a little nostalgic. He said in a low voice, "Actually, it can be considered as compensation from the heavens." He finally understood that Huan's memory loss wasn't a loss. It was compensation. It was to make up for what was missing in his heart. For them to really start afresh. He was the only one who remembered the unpleasant past, and her memories were all good things. The good things that belonged to him, Mo, alone. Mo smiled and slowly drove the car into the parking lot. They didn't get out of the car immediately. Instead, they stayed in the car for about half an hour. Well, this half an hour was spent kissing. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.